Hey everyone, Zapid Jeff here. Today we're going to be taking a look at number 3 in our series on Atari ST and STE vertical flying shooters, 1989. And the reason we're playing Xenon 2 here is because Xenon 2 is one of the greatest vertical shooters for the Atari ST, and it was released in 1989. Here's the instruction manual for the version that I had in 1989 with Fulton Bot. We're twin brothers. And here is my 4160 STE playing Xenon 2. The Evolution of Atari ST Vertical Flying Shooters, Part 3, 1989, A Rising Tide? Question mark? In 1989, two significant things happened in the history of Atari ST vertical shooters. First, Xenon 2 was released, which is considered by many to be the best vertical shooter of all time on the ST. And also, SHMUP Construction Kit, or SEUCK, SUCK.IT, hit the market. The latter showed that pretty much anyone with time on their hands could create a decent classic arcade single screen or vertical scrolling shooter, greatly democratizing the proliferation of good but not great shooters on the ST. Xenon 2 was released in the summer of 1989 and SHMUP Construction Kit near the end of the year for the Christmas season. This means that 1989 was not inundated with user-created SEUCK shooters that would start later in 1990. The other games we have to look at in 1989 are relatively unique, at least as far as unique can go in this genre. But overall, it was not a great year for ST vertical shooters in terms of quantity, but was a step up visually and technically from the average of 1988. Most of these games include nice bolt-on weapons and attempts at parallax scrolling. Also, one of our all-time favorite Atari ST arcade ports made it to market. None of these games pulled off as well as our first game though. So let's get started with Xenon 2. Xenon 2 by the venerable Bitmap brothers is considered by many to be one of the best vertical shooters on the ST. And why not? It looks great, plays great, and while it has its faults with difficulty and some dodgy collision detection here and there, it makes up for it with pure fun and presentation. The music is great, the parallax scrolling is cool, and you have possibly the best assortment of bolt-on weapons this side of R-Type. We did an entire hour-long podcast episode with Tony Longworth on how much we love this game. We aren't starting with this one to get it out of the way, but rather to let the other games from 1989 breathe a little. There is a Peter Pereira hard drive version for the STE that will play stereo digital music while the gameplay is going. I have a version here that I replaced the Bomb the Bass tune with an inferior one that I created myself, because the Bomb the Bass music licenser is pretty litigious with YouTube videos. Most magazines gave this game about 90%, highlighted by ST users' 10 out of 10 rating, calling it a must for any serious arcade addict. But the Second Sight part of the review commented on the difficulty and was happy you started from where your last ship was destroyed and not back at the beginning. Even with some technical glitches, game design decisions like this helped put the Bitmaps and Renegade squarely at the top of the ST gaming charts. Does the rising tide of Xenon 2 lift all vertical shooters in 1989, or do they get stuck in its proverbial wake? That's what we're here to find out. It needs to be said that while the Bitmaps and Renegade did an excellent job of this, and while the market for good ST shooters was thinning out in 1989, there are some nice and mediocre ones to take a look at. None rise to this level though, at least to us. So let the fight for 1989 second place commence. Thunderwing is a little gem of a vertical shooter published by Arctronics, who are behind another ST hidden gem called Fastlane, a non-spectacular but really fun racing title. Thunderwing has good control, fun graphics, a bouncy tune, and nice stuff to blow up. The spacebar, or holding the button down for an extra second, fires the Disruptor, a really cool weapon that circles the ship rather than just a plain old smart bomb. Little touches like a good intro skill level make it worth playing. Shoot down a red attack wave and pick up the F icon for 3 times fire. Reviews. ST User Volume 4, Issue 3 gave it a 7 out of 10, saying, Thunderwing lacks the spark of originality that makes a game interesting. ST Action, Issue 12 gave it a 32%. A very simple, untaxing game. License to Kill by Domark is not exactly a vertical shooting game, but it contains some sequence that we're using here only to show that even game licenses, no pun intended, were still going to tried and true formulas at this time when they could not think of anything better. This game has some names behind it, like David Whitaker and Paul Margrave on music and programming, respectively, and while it does pull itself out of the mires of movie license hell, the whole simply is not worth the sum of its parts. So License to Kill contains multiple scrolling sections of various types, 2 of which are difficult flying and shooting missions. This is a hard game, and it demands a trainer, at least for these old hands, on an Atari CX40. Besides the nuts difficulty, it's actually pretty fun. You learn pretty quickly that you need to let the Jeep go ahead and fire at the things on the ground shooting at you from the sides in this first sequence. And then you get to a unique run and gun section. It's not a vertical flying shooter, but that comes in later levels, although I was not able to get to that section because I'm terrible at this game. Reviews. ST Format Issue 1, thin on plot, but well presented with some tinny sounds, but the best Bond game to date. ST Action Issue 16, not very difficult and doesn't live up to the license, 60%. The One, Issue 33, budget review, 4 stars, great entertainment at a budget price. Sidewinder 2 by Virgin on budget label 16 Blitz is up next. This is a fun vertical shooter with good effects and gameplay. A nice supply of power-ups and an infinite life cheat, if you can find one, help make this interesting and worth a few plays. This game was designed to be a challenge. The sheer amount of bolt-on weaponry and difficulty seem to have been inspired by Xenon 2. Sidewinder 2 is quite fun to play, but it lacks Xenon's advanced gameplay engine optimizations to take it further than just an above-average fun blaster. Reviews: none. Heavy Metal Heroes, aka Outlands by US Gold / Pandora, is not a budget game, but probably should have been. Nice graphics and pretty standard pew-pew sounds accompany a well-made but ultimately not optimized vertical scroller. The parallax is nice and a cheat mode would be really fun. One thing that games from 1989 seem to have risen along with Xenon 2 is some nifty parallax scrolling. It would have been nice to see the frame rate improvements by removing some of this though, because as it stands, the game is far too slow in some places to be fun. Again, the difficulty is high, and that makes this not as much fun as it could have been. The two-player simultaneous action is a nice addition though. For a game that had 2 different names and 4 separate releases, we could only find a single review. ST User Volume 5 Issue 2 gave it a 6 out of 10. Outlands may have sold had it been pitched at the budget price range. But if you have $20 to spend on an all-out zapper, I suggest you give it to the Bitmap brothers. Triton III by Wicked Games. This vertical shooter gets some things right and some things wrong. The right, nice parallax scrolling and cool things to shoot. The wrong, one-hit death with the scenery, an enemy that can't be destroyed right in the first few screens. This is another game that looks good, but has literal pew-pew sounds. Accompanying the game are some pretty neat explosions. On the other hand, it got decent reviews, and there are extra weapons. It's not Xenon, but it's also not 1942 on the NES. Reviews. ST User Volume 4 Issue 10. They gave it 6 out of 10, complaining how difficult it is, but they did like smooth scrolling and the budget price tag. Swiftar by Acustar, or Swiftar by Acustar, seems a few years old and is of the 1987 pew-pew variety, but it has it where it counts. The Americans behind this knew how to make a good vertical shooter in the Plutos variety, with some slowdown, but not much. Basically, pick up the crystals and shoot everything. Clean graphics and nice sounds complete the package. Reviews. ST Action Issue 14 gave it 50%, saying that it lacked originality, but they had a lot of fun with the action. It wasn't quite enough to merit a full review, with a score over 50 though. On that note, the reviewer said that he really liked shooters. It's good to see a magazine putting an enthusiast in charge of a genre, rather than seeing someone like Steve Panic from Analog, the Atari-specific US magazine, always starting his reviews with, "I hate this type of game." ST Format Issue 29 did a review when Swiftar was dropped to public domain a few years later. They gave it 70%, although by now I've read enough ST Format PD reviews to know that they use a skewed ranking system that gives any playable game a pretty good score. They said that this was sluggish, but colorful blasting. Faint praise indeed. Deathstar by Sean Macy. This game works in TOS 1.02 only, and is quite good for plain old STOS. Yes, it was built in STOS. It doesn't seem to be using any STOS extensions like Missing Link, so this is quite an accomplishment. It's really one of the better STOS games. It's very difficult and the pace is slow, but it's well made. Shoot all of the enemy, pick up the money and power tokens that they drop, but don't shoot them. So unfortunately, Sean Macy, the STOS developer behind this little gem, is not credited with any other ST games. Dragon Spirit. This Tengen Namco coin-op conversion by Domark looks good as you fly your dragon up the screen, but moves far too slow to be compelling. Both the game engine and gameplay get boring quickly with no music. There are some nice neat power-ups to collect though. The team seemed to have bitten off a little more than they could chew with this one, or they weren't given enough time. The engine needed a lot more polish before release. It runs at a good clip when no enemies are on the screen, which for some reason is often. As soon as they arrive though, the game crawls a little like a 1987 PD vertical shooter. I could be wrong about this game though, because some of the early reviews were pretty good. In CVG issue 95, they gave it 82%, saying an accurate and action-packed conversion. Interesting. Ace issue 28 gave the ST version 795 out of 1,000 and said, smooth vertical scrolling and pretty mean difficulty make for addictive gameplay. The only Atari specific review we found was Atari User page 6, issue 42. They didn't have scores at this time, but they said that this is only for vertical scrolling shooter addicts if they still exist. Hey Atari User, they still exist, but this game isn't for me. Alpha Max by New Dimensions. This looks and sounds good, but plays very slow. It has unoptimized STOS written all over it. It's ambitious, but it's really a candidate that should have been done with SHMUP Construction Kit. We've seen with Deathstar that this type of game is surely possible in STOS, but you have to really know how to get the best out of it. It's a good attempt, but it just doesn't cut it. Although, AtariMania.com doesn't say this was done in STOS, but machine language, so there's that. White Panther also developed Beautiful Babe, listed as a vertical shooter in 1989, but to us is a vertical run and gun, or should I say crawl and gun? That'll be covered in the history series on vertical run and gun games. Reviews. ST Action issue 15 was not in the mood for this game, giving it 36% in one of those half-page, it's not that we hate it, it's that we just don't care to really try reviews. They do give credit to the genius 16-year-old who created it with backhanded praise. At 16, John Wheatman is a real inspiration to the next generation of game creators. Then feel the need to backhand it with, he has successfully produced an arcade game which somebody thinks should be published. Nice job, ST Action. Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit, or SEUCK by Outlaw Palace. Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit is not a game in itself, but a tool to make old-school single or vertical scrolling shooters. As long as you want your games to be more Pluto-style with no power-ups, you'll enjoy games made with this. The 3 example games run the gamut of what can be created. From what we have played, Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit games can look nice and score pretty well by offering a lot of shooting action. Not bad, and much easier to get into than a programming language like STOS, but also less flexible in spilling your creative juices. The 3 games included Psycho Blast. It's not a vertical shooter. You stay in the middle of the screen and travel around a square shooting at enemies attacking in at you. Slap and Tickle. This puts some of the commercial vertical shooters we have looked at previously to shame on a pure technical level. It's a nice looking and well-made blaster. Blood for Bullets, a commando-style game that shows what can be done with the engine. Shoot 'em Up construction kit received pretty universal praise in the magazines. ST Format Issue 4 continued the juvenile but kind of funny puns on the name being a little too close to the word suck in their Suck It and See It review. SEUCK and See It review. They gave it a value score of 86% and said brilliant for the non-programmer, even if only one kind of game can be made. They kind of missed the point that 3 pretty different games came with the package, but it's also accurate in a way. You could only really make shooter games. Last Duel by US Gold is a tier text conversion of a Capcom coin-op. It has the oversaturated colors of early 8-bit to ST conversions, very twitchy controls, but some nice music, sounds, and action. It's also hella difficult to know what to dodge and what to pick up, and seems to play at a hyper speed that would be necessary to pull quarters and 10p coins out of pockets, but it's not necessary in a computer conversion. It's difficult to tell if you're flying or in a boat, and the addition of very chunky small horizontal scrolling to slightly widen the playfield doesn't do it any favors. But still, I kind of like it, and I'm going to keep this on a list of games to play with a trainer to see what comes next. Reviews. ST User Volume 4, Issue 1. My younger son and I committed to Last Duel as a twosome. Its strength is total addictiveness. However, do look before you buy, as it may not be everyone's cup of tea. And finally, our favorite vertical shooter of the year that's not called Xenon 2. Gemini Wing by Storm Virgin. Virgin hired Imagitech, the future team behind many unreleased Falcon games such as Raiden, to test their mettle converting this Tecmo coin-op to the ST. This is a very, very solid arcade port that oozes playability. Some of the parallax scrolling of the arcade is retained, and you have a really cool and unique collect-a-chain of power-ups to utilize. The reviews were generally good when it was released, but got worse when the budget version arrived, because game design had matured. Definitely well-coded, with a lot going on in brilliant colors. Arcade and Amiga parallax has been replaced in some places with aspect depth, and this helps speed the engine along. Now that's using your resources right. This is very much a gem. While reviewers were getting tired of this type of game, I think us shooter junkies would have been pleasantly surprised at how well the developers pulled this off. Reviews. ST Action Issue 17, 55%. Its best feature is its simultaneous 2-player mode. ST Format Issue 21, 64%. Zillions of power-ups and simultaneous 2-player action make this game worth a look. ST User probably said it best in Volume 4 Issue 8, the same issue where they gave Xenon 2 a 10 out of 10. They gave this an 8 out of 10, saying Gemini Wings is good. It's fast and colorful and musical and contains touches of originality, but it's still a vertical shooter. For vertical shooters like me, if I'd had this game then, that would have been heaven. I'm never going to beat that boss. So, 1989, Atari ST vertical shooters. It was a good year. Xenon 2 came out and it did raise the tide a little bit. The overall quality of all the games was just a little bit higher than 1988. There was a smaller number of them, but look at Gemini Wing. Gemini Wing, just a fantastic game that gave sort of bad scores from some people because it wasn't as good as Xenon 2. Was it going to be? No. But it's one of the best arcade translations on the Atari ST. Let's try and kill this boss. No, you don't hit me. So that's Gemini Wing, one of the better Atari ST vertical shooters from 1989. This is the type of arcade conversion we only hoped for. This is the bubble bobble of vertical flying shooter games for the Atari ST. But no one talks about it. Why? Because Xenon 2 came out. So let's keep Xenon 2 here, but what about the rest of the games? Good games. Atari ST getting some good games in 1989, especially games like Gemini Wing. Okay, next time we hit 1990. Until then, into the vertical blink.
An 8-Bit Rocket Studios production.